Hello mga boys, so I decided to make this video in response to Sir Ronel and Cajas Solis' comment on my gospel reflection last September 24. Shout out to you, Sir Ronel. Here is his comment. So therefore, Paul wrote before the so-called four gospels because most of the scholars believe that Paul wrote at around 40 to 60 AD. So the New Testament we have right now is chronologically wrong. And most of the popular scholars today, like Bart Ehrman and James Tabor, believe that four gospel is heavily influenced by Paul. So technically, yes, Paul's letters were written down before the gospels. Here's a rough timeline as to when they were approximately written down. For Paul's letters, they were written down between 48 to 65 AD. Gospel of Mark were written between 65 to 70 AD. Gospel of Matthew were written down between 70 to 85 AD. Gospel of Luke were written down between 80 to 90 AD. Gospel of John were written down between 90 to 110 AD. So obviously, Paul's letters are the earliest Christian writings we have recorded. And that's not just a French view, it's a widely held consensus among the mainstream scholars. Now, the New Testament is not in chronological order. That is true. The New Testament, as arranged in most Bibles, is not chronological. Here is how it's typically structured. It starts with the four Gospels from Matthew down to the Gospel of John. And of course, thereafter is the Acts of the Apostles book, then followed by the letters of Paul. It starts with the letter of Paul to the Romans down to the letter of Paul to Philemon. And then the general epistles, which are the book of Hebrews down to the book of Jude. And it ends with the book of Revelation. So yes, the order we see in the Bible is theological and literary, not historical or chronological. Now the question is, did Paul influence the gospel? And this is where it gets a little more complicated, because Bart Ehrman, a very prominent New Testament scholar, does not say that the Gospels were heavily influenced by Paul in terms of direct theological dependence. He actually often emphasizes the difference between Paul's theology and the portrayal of Jesus in the Synoptic Gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. While on the other hand, James Tabor is more critical of Paul and argues that Pauline Christianity reshaped or even distorted the original message of Jesus. Tabor leans toward the idea that later Christian theology, especially in the Gospel and beyond, was filtered through Pauline's lenses. So, Ehrman would say that the Gospel writers may have known Pauline theology, but they were not writing Pauline theology directly. Tabor leans toward the view that Paul significantly altered early Christianity, that the later texts, possibly even the Gospels, reflect this shift. So, some scholars see continuity between Paul and the Gospels. Others, like Tabor, see major differences. That's Tabor's personal point of view. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's right. Thank you.